Let's start another Webflow session and build daily interaction number 27. Hey, what's up everyone? John with WebDev for you, and welcome to the Daily Interaction series, where every weekday we build a new interaction or animation in Webflow. Today we're going to be building a full screen menu with a stagger reveal. So here when I click on open menu on this menu trigger, we have these blocks coming up, or these panels, and then the menu items come in a staggered motion. And when I close it, it plays in reverse. All right, so this could make for a really interesting menu for your website, and it can give you some ideas for your own interactions and different things you can do with the menu. All right, looks good. So this was actually inspired by this website here, diplo.studio. This was also built in Webflow, where they have a stagger reveal menu coming in, and it looks good. All right. So yeah, this is what we will be building today. First, we're going to build out all the elements, and then we're going to add the on-click interaction to open the menu. All right, looks good. So to view more daily interactions and premium content, visit webdevforyou.com. Also, be sure to subscribe below to receive a notification every time there is a new daily interaction. Okay, so here I have a blank Webflow project, and we'll start with the daily interaction class naming convention. So it's the daily interaction number. So today is 27. And then the element. So every element on this site will have a D-27 in front of it, and this is for consistency purposes and so that we know we're working with daily interaction number 27. So the first thing I'm going to do here is add a section. So I'll add an element. I'll add a section. It's going to be a full viewport section, and I'll give it the class name D-27 section. Then for the height, I'm going to set it to 100 VH, so it spans the full height of the viewport, and it will be the full width as well. Then I'll scroll down to background. I'll set the background color to black right here. And then I'll go to display setting. I'm going to set it to flex, and I'm going to set it to horizontal, justify start, and align center. Because I'm going to have the menu trigger here on the left and in the center. Okay, so in this section, I'm going to add a menu trigger. So I'm going to add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and I'm going to name this D-27 menu trigger. I'm not going to give it a lot of styling. I just wanted it to act as a menu trigger. So when I click on it, the menu opens. So there I have the menu trigger. I'm going to give it a specific width and height. So I'm going to say 50 pixels by 50 pixels. And then for the background, I'm going to set the background color to white. And I'm going to give it a border radius of 50%. So to create a perfect circle, it just needs to be half the size of the square. So I could have entered in 25 pixels or 50% to have it be half the size of the square, which makes it a perfect circle. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is I'll give it a bit of margin from the left, so something like 30 pixels. And there we go. So we have the menu trigger here on the left, and this is what's going to act as the interaction trigger. So when we click on this button, the menu is going to open. Okay, so now we can build out the entire menu. All right, so to do that, I'll click on the section. I'll go to styles, and I'm going to set the section to a position of relative. So that fixed menu is relative to this section and not relative to some other parent element. It'll fill the viewport regardless of what element it's inside of because it's fixed. But just so I can order the menu trigger and the different menu elements in the menu wrapper, I'm going to set the section to a position of relative. And this will be a bit more clear in a second as we start adding more elements. So there we have the section set to relative. So within the section, I'm going to add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and I'll give it the class name D-27 menu wrapper. Okay, and for this, I'll set it to a position of fixed right here, and I'll set it to full. Okay, so now we have the menu wrapper inside of the section. It's set to fixed, and full. All right, so that's all I have to do for the menu wrapper, and now we can place elements inside of the menu wrapper, or yeah, the menu elements. So the next thing I'll do is add a menu overlay. So in the demo, we notice that if I click the menu trigger, we have this white overlay in the background, and we have the menu items in front. So to add the overlay, I'm going to add an element, add a div block, and I'll give this div block the class name d-27 menu overlay. All right, and for this, I'm going to set it to a position of absolute and full. All right, so it's going to fill the entire menu wrapper, and because the menu wrapper is fixed, anything inside of it will be fixed as well. So there we have it, absolute and full. And then I'll give it a background color. I'll set the background color to white and give it an opacity of 80%, so it's a bit see-through. We'll bring the menu trigger in front in a second, but yeah, there we have the menu overlay. The next thing I want to add are the blocks. So we have these blue blocks here. So I'll go ahead and add those. So the first thing I'll do is select the menu wrapper. So we're going to place it in the menu wrapper. I'll add an element. I'll add a div block, and I'll give this div block the class name d-27 blocks wrapper. So we're going to place these blocks in the wrapper. So for this, I'm also going to set a position of absolute and full, so it fills the entire menu wrapper. I'm also going to set an overflow of hidden because for the interaction, these blocks move up and down, and I don't want the blocks to be visible outside of the blocks wrapper. So by setting it to an overflow of hidden, if they were scrolling to the site, we wouldn't see the blocks. Well, because it's filling the entire viewport, we won't see them anyways, but I like to just set it to an overflow of hidden because I know the blocks are going to go outside of this wrapper. All right, so we have the blocks wrapper. I'm also going to set a display setting of flex and horizontal, justify center, and align end, because the blocks are going to start at the bottom and I want them to be in the center. All right, so now I'll add the first block. So if we go into the navigator, we have the menu wrapper, menu overlay, and the blocks wrapper. So in the blocks wrapper, I'm going to add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and I'll give it the class name d-27 block. And for this, I'm going to set it to a width of 20%. And the first block is going to be a height of 50%. And then I'll give it a background color here of blue. And I'm going to give it a shadow as well. So here in the shadows, I'm going to select add a drop shadow. I'm going to set it to the angle 135 degrees. The blur, I'm going to set it to 50. And the distance, I'm going to set it to 8. I think that's what I had it here for the block. Let me just double check. Drop shadow, 8 and 50, and it looks good. So yeah, there we have the shadow. Then I'm going to set the opacity for the color for the shadow to 40%, so it's not as dark. Okay, so there we have the first block. So what I'm going to do is go in the navigator, and I'm going to copy this block 4 times. So I'm going to hit Command-C to copy, and in the blocks wrapper, I'm going to select it and paste 4 times. So I have 4 blocks. Now I'll select each block. I can select it here in the designer, and I'll give each one a combo class and change the height. By giving it a combo class, we can assign individual properties to each block. So for the second block, I'm going to give it a class name of 2, and I'll set the height to 80%, so it's a bit taller. The third one, I'll select it, give it a combo class of 3, set the height to 70%, and the fourth one, I'll give it a combo class of 4, and set it to a height of 30%. So there I have the blocks, and it looks good. So if I want to affect all the blocks at the same time, or add a universal property to all the blocks, I want to make sure I select the first block that doesn't have a combo class. Because it doesn't have a combo class, it's going to affect all of these elements because they have the class applied to them. So I'll select the first one here, and I'm going to add some negative margin to bring those blocks together. So here for the margin, I'm going to hold down Alt and drag to the left. So by holding down Alt, we're affecting the left and the right. and I'm going to give it a negative margin of about negative 15 pixels, so they move in together. All right, so there we have it, and that nice shadow adds a nice effect because it looks like the blocks are on top of each other. All right, so yeah, we have the blocks. So the next thing we need to do is add the menu items. So to do that, I'm going to go into the menu wrapper, and I'm going to add a menu item wrapper. So I'm going to add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and I actually want this menu item wrapper to be in the center. So for the menu wrapper, I'm going to give it a display setting of flex, justify center, and align center. So now that menu item wrapper will be in the center. So here I'll select the div block we just added, and I'll give it the class name D-27 menu item wrapper. Okay, I'll set it to a position of relative, so it comes to the front and we can select it. And I'll add some menu items inside of here. Yeah, for this I also want to give it a display setting of flex, vertical, justify center, and align center, because we're going to have menu items stacked on top of each other. So here I'm going to add an element, and actually before we do that, with the menu item wrapper selected, let's go to the element settings, and for the tag, I'm going to set it to a nav. So this defines a set of navigation links, such as those in your main site nav. So because I'm going to have menu items inside of this menu item wrapper, I want this to be kind of declared as a nav wrapper. So it's letting search engines and the structure of the site know that inside of this menu item wrapper we have nav links. So here I'll select it. So there we go. And now I'll add an element. I'll add a link block, so we can link it to a URL, a page section, an email, telephone number, or a file. So there I have the link block. I'll give it the class name D-27 link block. All right, and inside of this link block, I want to add a large text and a small text. So I'll add an element, and I'll add a text block. Oh, actually, one more thing. For the link block, we also want to set it to a position of relative, because we are going to have an absolute position div inside of this link block. So I want that absolute position div to be relative to this link block and not relative to some other parent element. So by setting it to relative, anything inside of it will be relative to it. Okay, so now I'll add an element. I'll add a text block right here, and I'll give it the class name D-27 menu item large. Okay, and we notice it has kind of this blue color and an underline, and that's because it's in a link block, so Webflow is giving it the hyperlink styling, so it's making it blue with the underline. So to remove that, I'll go into the navigator, I'll select the link block, go into styles, and here for typography, for the underline, I'll say none. Okay, so that has no underline. I'll go back into the navigator, select the menu item large, and I'll go to typography, and I'll set the font. So I'm going to set it to Montserrat, give it the color of black, maybe set the opacity to something like 60%. And then I'll adjust the font. Let me double click inside of here and call it home. And I'm going to say Montserrat, and the font weight I'm going to say semi-bold, and we'll make the font larger, like 54, and the line height will say something like 70. Okay, so there we have the large text, and now I want to place the small text here. So actually, let me set the opacity for this to 40%. All right, so we have the large text. Now within the link block, I'm going to add the small text. And now with the link block selected, I'll add an element. I'll add a text block, and I'll give it the class name D-27 menu item small. And for this, I'll set it to a position of absolute and full. So it fills the entire link block. And I'll give it a display setting of flex, horizontal, justify center, and align center, so that text is in the center. Okay, and then I'll go to typography. I'll set it to Montserrat, give it a color of white, and let me double click inside of here and I'll say home. Okay, all lowercase. And I think I can leave the text, or let's make the text 24 pixels, and the line height will make it 30. All right, so we have the large text and the small text. So now what I can do is select the link block. So I'll select it here, hit Command C to copy, and in the menu item wrapper, I'll paste 4 more times, so we have 5 menu items. And I'll give the menu item wrapper some top margin, so it goes a little bit lower, maybe something like 100. All right, so let me double click inside of here and rename it to home, about, services, contact, and shop. And I'll hide the small text for now. So I'll say display none, so we can change the large text. So home, about, services, services, contact, and shop. Okay, so I'll select the small text in here, and I'll say display flex, because that was the original display setting, and it looks good. So for the link block, I'm also going to add some bottom and top margin. So I'll hold down Alt and give it some bottom and top margin of like 5 pixels. All right, looks good. So yeah, we have all the elements we need to create the interaction. So the next thing I'll do, let me collapse all, is I'm going to select the menu trigger, and let me make sure it's in the front. So it is in the front, perfect. So yeah, we have the menu trigger selected. Now the next thing I want to do, with the menu trigger selected right here, I'm going to go into interactions, and it's going to be an element trigger. So when we click on an element, something's going to happen. Here I'll click the plus, and I'll select mouse click or tap. So I'll select it here, and on first click, we're going to start an animation. I'm going to add a new timed animation, so I'll click the plus, and I'll call this D-27 first click. So when we first click, we want the bars to come up and the menu items to come in. So like in this example, just like that, and it looks good. So yeah, let's go back into Webflow. So on first click, I want the bars to be all the way down and the menu to not be visible. So I'll select the first block here, and I'll add a new timed action. I'll say move, and on the y-axis, I'm going to move it 100%, so it moves all the way down. And I'm going to set it as the initial state. So right there, next to timing, click set as initial state. Then I'll select the second block, and I'll say move it down 100%, set it as the initial state. Then in the navigator, I'll select the third block. I'll say move down 100%, set as initial state. Then I'll select the fourth block. I'll say move down 100% and set it as the initial state. Okay, so there we don't initially see it. And also for the menu, so I'm going to select the menu item wrapper. I'm not going to have them stagger in for the menu items just to save a bit of time. I'm just going to move all the menu items at one time. So in this example, they're staggering in, but you could do that. You would just have to select each individual link block and apply an individual property to them. But just to save some time, I'm going to have the menu just come in at once. So here I'll select the menu item wrapper, go into interactions, I'll say move, and I'll move it to the left -100%, set it as the initial state, and I'll set the opacity to 0%. So initially it's not visible and it's 100% to the left, so we're going to have it fade in from the left. And for the timing, I'm going to set it as the initial state. All right, looks good. I also noticed that for the menu overlay, I don't need it to be white initially because we're going to change it within the interaction. So here I'll select the menu overlay. I'll go into styles, and for the background, I'm going to say transparent because we don't need a color to it right away. All right, and the last thing we need to do, let me go back into the interaction. The last thing we need to do is make sure that the entire menu wrapper is not visible initially. The reason for this is because the menu wrapper is actually, even though there's nothing in it at the moment, it's covering elements in front of it. So we need to set the display to none so we can interact with the website behind it. So here I can show a quick example of that. So here, if I click in the section, I add, let's say, a heading. So I'll scroll down, I'll add a heading. So there we have the heading, and I preview. If I try to select the heading, I can't interact with the heading here. And I'll have to bring the trigger to the front as well. But the reason for that is because the menu wrapper is still in front. It's still a div block in front of other elements. So we want to, in the interaction, we want to go to, we want to select the menu wrapper and go into interactions, and I'll say here, I'll select it and I'll say hide show. So let me scroll down. Yeah, I'll select hide show under miscellaneous, and I'll set the display to none. All right, and I'll set it as the initial state. So now if I preview, I can select the text in here and I can interact with elements on the site. All right, so initially it's display none. So the first thing we're gonna do afterwards is add another timed action, give it, set it to hide show, and we're gonna give it a display setting of flex to bring it back in. So the menu initially is not visible. Then the first thing we do is have it become visible, and then we're going to have all the other elements come in. So the next thing I want to do is bring in the menu overlay. So here I'll select the menu overlay, go into interactions, and here I'll add a new timed action. I'll say BG color, and here I'll add a color of white and an opacity of 80%. All right, looks good. I'll give it an easing of ease and a duration of 1 second. Okay, so there I have the menu overlay. So the next thing I want to do is bring in each block one after another. So here I'll select the first block. I can select it in the timed actions because it's right here. Then I'll say move, and I'll move it on the y-axis to 0%, which is its original position. I'll give it an easing of ease out expo, and a duration of 0.5 seconds is okay. Then I'll select the second block, and I'll do the same thing. I'll give it a y position of 0%, and an easing of ease out expo, and a duration of 0.5 is okay. Then I'll select the third block. I'll say move. On the y, I'll say 0%, and an easing of ease out expo. And then the fourth block, select it here, say move, and I'll set it to 0% on the y, and an easing of ease out expo, and a duration of 0.5. So I want all of this to start at the same time, and then I'm going to give a delay to each block. So here I'll just click, hold, and drag, and place each block on top of each other, just like that. So the menu overlay and all the blocks will start at the same time. And now I'm going to give a delay to each block. So because they all have the same class name, I'm going to start the delay at the last one, because what Webflow does when you add a delay to the first element is it moves it down all the way within the timed action. And because they have the same class name, and they start moving, it could get a bit confusing. So I'll start at the bottom so they all stay in the same place. So the first block is going to have a delay of 0.2, second one 0.4, then 0.6, and then 0.8. So here for the last block, I'm going to add a delay of 0.8. The fourth is going to have a delay of 0.6. The second is going to have a delay of 0.4, and the first is going to have a delay of 0.2. All right, so let's take a look and see how that looks. So I'll preview. I'll click on the menu trigger. The overlay turns white, and we have the different blocks coming in. All right, looks good. So the next thing I want to do is bring in the menu item wrapper, have it coming to 0% and to become visible. So here I'll select the menu item wrapper, and I'll say move, and I'll move it on the X to 0%, give it an easing of ease out expo, and I'll start it with the blocks, so it starts there. And I'll also set the opacity here to 100%, which it is right here. Give it an easing of, we'll say ease out expo. and start it with the rest of the timed actions. So I'll just click, hold, and drag and place on top. So now I preview, I click, they come in, and the menu comes in. Perfect. I like that timing. It's pretty quick and snappy, and I'm okay with that. So looks good. So yeah, the next thing we need to do is have the animation occur in reverse when we click again. So here I'll close this, and on second click we're going to start an animation. I'm going to duplicate the first click because it has a lot of the properties we already need. So I'll say duplicate, and I'll select it here, D-27, first click 2, and I'll rename it to D-27 second click. Okay, so we just need to reverse everything here, and I'm also going to delete all the initial states because we already set the initial state for the first click, so we don't need the initial state for the second click. So here I'll just delete all the initial states, and there we go. So for the menu wrapper hide show, I'm going to drag this all the way to the bottom because we just need it to hide after the animation goes in reverse. So for the menu overlay, yeah, and actually we're going to have the blocks come in first, so I'm going to drag all the blocks to the top, just like this. Just drag them all the way to the top there, and yeah, now they all have a delay of 0.2. So the first block I want to go out, or actually, yeah, let's set the property for the blocks first. So I want them all to move down 100%. So on the Y, I'm going to set it to 100% for all the blocks. And I'm going to change the order. So yeah, block 1 is going to go first. So I'm going to bring this to the top, and then block 2, I believe this is block 2. I'm going to bring this in next. I'm going to give it a delay of 0.4, or yeah, let me just drag them on top of each other first. So let's see, block 1, and yeah, no, this is block 2, so it's going to have a delay of 0.4, and then yeah, so block 1, or let me select it here. Okay, no, this should be, yeah, 0.4, and then this is going to be 0.8, I believe. So 1, 2, no, this should, yeah, and this should be 0.6. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, perfect. Okay, so I just reversed the order, the delay for each one. So the last one goes down first, and then the other ones go down. So it's just a matter of playing with the timed actions here. And actually, I'm going to set it to, let me do 0, yeah, 0.2, and 0.4, and 0.6, because I don't need a delay initially for the first block. All right, so yeah, so we have 0.0, 0.2, 0.4, and 0.6, and they all move down from the right to the left. Okay, it's just a matter of playing with the timed actions here. And the next thing I'll do is have the, yeah, actually the first thing I want to do is have the menu item wrapper move to the left and disappear. So yeah, we're going to bring this to the top, just like that. Menu item wrapper, just like that. Okay, there we go. And I don't want a delay, so I'm going to say 0 and 0. Okay. And yeah, it's going to move to negative 100%, and the opacity is going to be 0%. Okay, so I actually do want a delay for these. So 0.8, 0.6, 0.4, and 0.2. So the menu moves to the left first, and then the blocks disappear from right to left. All right, and then we want the menu overlay to go back to transparent, and we want to have the entire menu disappear. All right, so I think we've got it. Yeah, so the menu item wrapper goes first, and yeah, let me start these blocks with each other, so this all happens kind of in a nice sequence. So block, yeah, so 0.8 again, 0.6, and 0.4, and point to. Okay, there we go. And then we can do the menu overlay. And yeah, we'll just start it with the blocks and the menu item wrapper. And then at the end, we're going to hide the entire menu wrapper so we don't see it and we can interact with the menu. Okay. So yeah, I know I kind of went a little bit back and forth here, but basically the first thing we're going to do is have the menu item wrapper move to the left and disappear. Then we're going to have each block go down from right to left. So block 1, 2, 3, and 4, kind of in a reverse order. And then the menu overlay is going to turn to transparent so we don't see it. And finally, we're going to just hide. Yeah, so here for the menu wrapper, I'm going to say display none. So it's almost as if it's not on the site, so we can interact with the menu behind. Yeah, so we can interact with the website behind the menu. All right, looks good. If you have any questions about anything I went over, definitely let me know in the comment section below. It is just a matter of playing with the timed actions and getting the right timing for all the elements. So yeah, let's go ahead and preview. So I click on the menu trigger, the bars come in, the menu comes in from the left to the right. And if I click again, nothing is occurring. So yeah, we need to bring the menu trigger. So I'll select the menu trigger here, and I'll give it a position of relative, and I'll give it a high Z index of something like 99. So it comes in front of all of the other elements. So we do want to make sure, and I'm going to change this menu trigger to a color of blue so we can see it a bit better when the menu overlay comes in. So I'll preview, I'll click the menu trigger, it comes in, I click again, it disappears, and yeah, it just plays in reverse. So I click, it comes in, perfect, I click again, and it goes in reverse, and I can interact with the site, and it looks good. All right, so it is important to kind of hide the menu so you can interact with the site behind it. All right, yeah, clicked on it enough. So the last thing I'll do is I'll set this menu trigger. I'll give it a cursor. So here for the cursor, I'll say pointer, so we know we can click on it. So there we have the pointer. I click. I can link these menu items out to anything, and it looks good. Yeah, so that's it for daily interaction number 27. I know it's a longer one, and I kind of click that menu trigger a lot, but yeah, it's a fun animation. It's a fun menu. It was inspired by Diplo.studio, where they have that Stagger, that full screen menu with a Stagger reveal. Perfect. Yeah, so here's the example. Let me just go back here. Yeah, so that's it for this video tutorial. Yeah, let me go back into the example here. If you have any questions about anything I went over, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. If you did want the staggered effect, rather than moving the entire menu item wrapper, you could just target the individual link blocks within the navigator and move those. You could set it to like 100 VW, so it goes all the way off the site, and then you can bring them in one at a time in the interaction. So the initial state could be like negative 100 VW, and then just set it to, in the timed action, set it to like 0 VW, so it goes back to its original position. And then you could have the staggered effect here. But just to save some time, I just moved the entire menu item wrapper. All right, yeah, looks good. So that is it for daily interaction number 27. To view more daily interactions and premium content, visit webdevforyou.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next daily interaction.